playbook.
All right. Thank you so much, Kate. And I hope you can see my screen here.
Yeah, we can see. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, amazing. Okay. You're absolutely right. I've done the usual of like writing a huge long thing. So what I'll do is you can probably find me on LinkedIn or any of those platforms. I'll give you my email at the end. Hit me up. I will send this over. What I'll do now, in the interest of time, is I won't show you loads and loads of case studies, but there are some pretty awesome case studies that I'd really love to let you have. So you're more than welcome to have them. Just, ask for this deck and I'll just give it to you 100%. So let's go. New year, new you. Around about this time, this is actually, I think it was yesterday, it was Quitter's Day. It's the day when all those resolutions that you said you were going to do have fallen fully flat, and you're now just the same you as you were last year, right? But what's really interesting is, I want to use this as a bit of a metaphor because I want to be a little bit controversial in this talk. We all get very excited about new technologies. And look, I mean, I'm sitting here surrounded by absolute nonsense that I spend all my money I don't have on, because I'm a wannabe DJ. I'm from a place called Essex, where every single person is a failed DJ. What you start to realize is some things just don't change. And I really want to be a bit controversial here and say, look, so much is going to change, but so much is not going to change. Okay. Don't let this digital hurricane spin you around and throw you out. And I'm going to start and I'm going to finish with something that's controversial. We do not need more 21-year-old TikTok experts. Okay. What we need is more people who have been brand guardians, who understand how strategy, not tactics, builds brands. And we need you now more than ever. Okay, so here's my controversial beginning. So let's chat about award-winning brand work. When we get into this, Morten will be able to explain a lot more, and I'll send you the examples we were going to show. But we've been really, really lucky, I think, and I think because of the way that we're placed as Vice Media, we have lots of lines of business, and I think that means that we're inside culture, right? And that allows us to create powerful stuff that actually, I think, in this moment in time, brands really, really need beyond the old playbook, which I think that you were going to see isn't really working anymore. So how do we get into this? I think step one is, before you get too excited, let's remember the fundamentals, okay? Bad work does not become good work just because you leverage the new technology, okay? And I just want to remind you, my title is innovation. I'm probably the least excited. I'm going to try and make this exciting for you guys because you deserve my excitement because you've given me your attention. But in all honesty, if you meet me in any normal day, I'm pretty just, yeah. And that gives me sanity. And I want it to give you sanity as well. Don't get too excited about this, okay? And because just remind ourselves, anybody who's into crypto, I'd just like to ask you how your portfolio is doing at the moment. Probably not too well, right? We all got really excited about Google Glass. I remember a time when the mini disc was the hottest thing on the planet. Pokemon Go was one of those things that we were all running around thinking how we can integrate with for a little while. And I haven't heard many briefs about Pokemon Go recently, have you? Right? Whether it was the Stanner stair lift or the Segway or the hoverboard, we've seen it all in every single thing. And every single year is the year of VR. I think it must be the year of VR since 2001 now. So forgive me if I sprinkle just a little bit of salt on this excitement, and I think it's a good thing to do. And look, this is how it always works, right? Sorry for the swearing here, but I'm not actually saying the word, you're just reading it. And what we tend to have is we have this kind of innovation trigger, this peak of inflated expectation, and then it goes down into disillusionment. But what we tend to find is, and this does happen, pretty much most of the time, you end up with this plateau of actual, usable technology. And so I want to just go to the core of this now. The human truth that you need to think about whenever you're thinking about Web3 is just this. Recently, and it's only the past 2 or 3 generations that we've done this, we are the first societies in the history to disband our communities and our cultural networks and our tribes. That basically means what we've done is we basically said, I live in Dubai. Now, I'm not from Dubai. And I love living in Dubai, but it does mean that I'm spending a lot less time with the communities I grew up in. If I'd been born a few generations before, I would have lived and died in Chelmsford and Essex, which I don't know if that would have been the greatest thing of all time. But in a way, psychologically, it would have been very easy. And I think there's a great TED talk called Why You Might Be Anxious or Depressed. And it basically says, once you distend yourself from your community networks, you are really in a very subconscious place, pining to get that connection somewhere else. And so that is what makes sense of the internet for me. When I think about the internet and I think about the way it was architected, because it wasn't architected with brands in mind, right? We artificially built a media buying layer on top of that later. But the authentic architecture of the internet is about this. It's about finding a sense of identity and belonging. And that can be as weird as you want it to be, as I think we're going to prove later. So Web 2.0 was all about that identity-based social media. It was about, I went to university, or you went to a festival one time, you met someone, you added them on Facebook, and now you're basically subjected to their updates about how many kids they've had and how they've got married, and she said yes, and all this kind of stuff, right? And so, but when you remember, it was all about that, right? And so obviously, very quickly, that descended into, look at me, check it out, look at my avocado on toast, etc., etc. And it started to manifest itself in negative ways, right? And, you know, the only thing that's worse than no human connection, which we seek more than anything, you know, advice, we call this the immortal insight. The immortal insight that trumps all other insights is that human beings are herd animals. We desire connection and we will find it somehow. But there's one thing that's worse than no connection, and that's inauthentic human connection. So just to really ram this point home, they asked people, how many of your Facebook friends actually care about you? And basically the results were pretty disturbing. Basically, people were saying, if your friends, if you died, your Facebook friends wouldn't even notice, right? Which is a terrible thing. So what we did was we essentially had this connection famine. We thought it was a connection feast, but it was really a connection famine. And so, you know, that led to this, right? That led to a lot of mental health issues and a lot of problems, and all of us really worrying, and a public debate about what to do. And it kind of went from this tech euphoria, this was 2006, and I'm sure a lot of us were part of this. And it was like, oh my God, this is going to be brilliant. And it's going to be this amazing era for brand building. And quite quickly, everyone was like, this is a nightmare, right? So here's the thing. It wasn't good for human beings, but honestly, it wasn't good for brands either. All of us, you know how like sometimes I'm sure we've all woken up after a night out and gone, oh dear, right? That's essentially the hangover that everybody in the brand world has right now, about the last 10 years. Every single one of us is like, oh, we definitely overinvested on that, and that, didn't we? Oof, right? And here's why. You know, let's just remind ourselves of some of those things. Facebook convinced us to build fan pages, then lowered the reach of those fan pages to less than 1%. So we had to buy the reach we'd already bought again, right? And that proved to us that we were never really owning those audiences. Facebook owned those audiences, right? We just rented them for the period of time that the media buy was running, okay? And that didn't lead anywhere good. That also, as more content entered the news feeds, the bidding became more expensive. So you had to bid more money today to get the same reach that you got yesterday. And it just exponentially went up and up and up, right? And of course, more than anything, the distraction of all of this led us down into this tinkering with 0.1% efficiency rates and not thinking about marketing effectiveness, thinking about marketing efficiency. And so we all got into the science, and so did I as well, of tinkering with things that would make a 0.3% increase on a click-through rate, right? And meanwhile, actually, our brands were tanking because we weren't thinking about the fundamental equity of those brands. Instead, we were caught up in all the toys and the ad tech, right? And so Web 3.0 is a direct reaction to all of these, the human and the brand side. And I've got to say, it's coming a bit too late for some people. You know, the response to all that ad tech excitement, all that euphoria over how many different ways can we intrusively force, things that pop up. It's like Morton and I were chatting. How many boxes do you have to tick and close before you can even read a website now? It's insane, right? It's got completely out of control. And so what did that lead to? The rise of ad-free streaming, no ads, the rise of ad-free gaming, and the rise of ad-block digital media. And so this is what we're now contending with in boardrooms. We're sitting in boardrooms, building campaigns, and we've got to contend with a world that's moved to ad-blocked, subscription, cookieless, private, pull, media and tech. It's a different world. And this has led, more importantly than anything, to a massive crisis in effectiveness. So I really want us to come back to this, because at the end of the day, if the work we do isn't effective and our brands don't grow, it's all just for nothing. So this is our humble opinion, Morton and I's. We have Virtue, our agency at Vice, which is, we've been able to do quite a lot of award-winning things, which Morton will be able to tell you about more. But, the first thing that we think about is that brands are just now being left outside of culture. They literally have a playbook that keeps them outside of culture, because their answer to everything is reach and frequency and efficient rate to keep distinct memory structures salient and top of mind. That's it. The buy and sharp play model. That's literally their playbook. And it doesn't quite work anymore. And they can't see where the diminishing marginal returns are coming from. So what you end up with is this. Brands born in the last century are having a very, very bad time. You used to get about 75 years in the Forbes 500, in the Fortune 500. Now you're getting about 15. And I'm sure that was 2019. I'm sure it's a lot less post-pandemic. But at the same time, there are brands coming out of nowhere that are getting billion-dollar market share. And so my question is, and you're going to be wondering, like, what's all this got to do with Web3? But really, I want you to understand that Web3 is just an extension of something that's been happening for quite a long time already. And what's basically been happening is we have seen a landscape where brands no longer compete with attention with other brands. Your competitors aren't just, the other soap brand or the other, right? They're competing with all of culture. And like, if I asked, everybody on this call to name these things that are happening here, whether it's Marshmello playing the biggest gig of all time inside Fortnite, or the GameStop thing that happened where literally, a group on Reddit took down Wall Street because they messed with gamers, right? You start realizing that these tiny things that we all dismiss as niche, they have somehow become very significant. And this will all be making sense by the end of this, I hope. So my thing to you guys at the beginning, if you're a brand or you're an agency, you really have two choices right now. You can compete with culture and you will die and you will burn out and you will want to die. By the time you're dead, you will actually seek death, right? Or you can leverage culture. And our strategy is it's much easier, it's much more fun, and it's much better for business if you do the second one. And so how do you do that? You try and find a valued role inside it instead of finding more increasing ways to interrupt it, right? So this is the playbook I wanted to show you guys. And look, we're lucky in this respect. This directly fits with our pitch to brands, right? And we've been very, very fortunate to work with a lot of great brands, and you're going to see in a minute. But we think that to add value inside culture, you have to be a cultural insider. It's no good being my dad, who just found out about Banksy the other day. Like literally, my dad was like, "Do you know Banksy?" And I was like, "Do you mean Banksy, the street artist?" And he was like, "Yes." And I was like, "He's Scottish, by the way. Sounds like Shrek." And I said, yeah. And he said, he's very good guy. He's going to be big. You should invest." And I was like, "Are you met?" So this is the problem. We now have a situation where, I hate to say this, but you're going, and I mean this with love, like a lot of brands go to people who are as culturally outside as they are to solve a problem that can only be solved from the inside of culture, right? And so what our unhumble and utterly shameless contention is, you ain't going to find other partners that are more inside than we are, right? That's why Snoop Dogg wears a Vice ring. We didn't pay him to do it. He wears it by his own volition, okay? Right? Now, my point is that you can shape culture and culture can shape you. And then you're in the game, right? And so let's remind ourselves, before I go into this quick playbook, how do all the winners, so Morton and I have been very lucky, and so have the rest of the team that helped build this, to sit on lots of juries, whether it's Cannes Lions or the Dubai Links or whatever, right? And basically, when you distill award-winning work down, this is what it does. All of it does this. Problem diagnosis with quantum qual, brutally clear strategic objectives, understanding exactly what your distinctiveness is, astonishing creativity, a 60% long-term budget that's all about like mass marketing, which I think, you know, is absolutely right, but a 40% short-term budget that's a bit more tactical and a bit more targeted, heavily consistent branded work that says the brand everywhere, no qualms about whether it's from a brand. It is definitely from a brand, and it's definitely from your brand. Invest more in media so that the salience, and you can keep it top of mind at an efficient reach frequency, and do that across lots of touch points so that it fits together as a whole ecosystem of a campaign, right? That's how you win. In the end, it comes down really to this. So marketing effectiveness is really about distinctiveness. What is it that only you can do? Affinity. Who do you roll with in the playground? Are you cool? You with the cool kids, or are you just someone who's buying the drinks, and as soon as you stop buying the drinks, everyone's just going to go and leave? Right? Fame. That's the thing about fame. You have to earn it. You can't buy it, right? You have to earn it. And then salience. That's something you can buy. But all three of the first ones, you can't buy. You have to own in the first instance. You have to share in the second instance, and you have to earn in the third. And then you can buy. So this is our model. So step 2 is define the target audience the way they define themselves. So I would love, just indulge me for a second. In the comments, let's just write, like, so I've been honest already. I'm a failed DJ. I spend way too much time, money, and resources thinking about electronic music and trying to be a DJ, and I'm useless, but I keep doing it. If I was to ask you what cultural networks and communities, by the way, community is just a non-mathematical word for cultural network. What cultural networks are you in? What would you say? And let's just get into the comments here. How do I get into it? Oh no, I shouldn't do that. You guys go for it though. Get on that keyboard, I want to see.
Do you want me to read them out? Can you see them?
Yeah, go for it.
So we have Logic Pro plugins, marketing society.
Yes! Yes, I love that person. That's amazing.
That's Assad.
Lassard, me and you, buddy. Me and you.
No one else? No one has a community?
Come on, guys. Let's have
Musician.
it. What network? So we got like, Morton is into cycling. He's obsessed with that. Have we got any other sports fans? Have we got film
swimming.
buffs? Swimming. What else we got?
Oh, there we go. They're all coming out now. Crypto, musical theatre, blogging, writing, Iveco Daily Campers Club, novel writing, running, books, coaching, 5 rhythms, dancing, cricket, football, another cricketer.
Wow.
There we go.
Jesus. Okay, I love you. And
go.
I wish we were all in a room together right now, because this is the joy of life, right? The joy of life is going down those rabbit holes and finding out what do you mean you love this crazy cold water swimming? Or why do you like electronic music? It's just boom, boom, whatever, right? But here's the crazy thing. Even before we did this, if I asked you that, if we had all day, I would just focus on this, because you'd start realizing, actually, there's networks already forming here. You know, so someone said crypto, I bet they're not alone. Someone said musical theatre. I'm a complete lovey when it comes to the theatre. I love it, right? I'll be running to. So what you start realizing is all of us are defined by the things we love and the things we value, and not by our demographics. Okay. Yes, I am a mid-30s, not going to go into specifics, male. But that doesn't mean that me and another mid-30s male who lives in the same place as me have anything in common, right? That's just lazy, right? Like nobody actually does that apart from brands and their agency partners, who think that because the guy on the left and the guy on the right are both 72 years old, they both have a high net worth, they both have 2 kids, and they both live in a place called Windsor, just outside of London, that they are the same. Right? So the Prince of Darkness and the Prince of Wales, according to the boardroom, there's no difference between them. And so my thing to you guys, first and foremost, before you even get into Web3, is remember that Web3, it rewards community thinking. So get into community thinking. Think about the communities that make up the internet, because in the end, the community networks that make up the internet is what the internet is. That's 3 definitions of the internet. Networks, connected to other networks. That's it. Interconnected networks, internet, right? So I'm trying to demystify the whole Web3 thing here, because actually it's so simple. All it is the logical extension of letting everybody in the world connect together with all the stuff they love. So I can meet all my strange techno fan friends, and Morton can go cycling and with all his buddies on Zoo, on Zwift, right? And this is the crazy world we live in. Whatever you love, you can find people who love it too. And this is what great brands like Peloton and stuff like that are leveraging. So my thing to you guys would be, and so this is where Web3 really takes off. In the old days, we had our kind of intimate connections. People, you'd be like, text your mum and dad, you know, but then outside of that, you had your kind of friends, you know, or status-based connections, right? Then outside of that, on like things like Instagram, you had like acquaintances, like you weren't necessarily friends, but you kind of followed each other. Then at the very end of that, what's happened now is you have AI interest-based algorithms. So TikTok is a fundamental shift. And that's why I think it's the beginning of Web3. Because with TikTok, you don't have to ever meet anyone. You're connected to them by the fact that you love the same thing. And it's got nothing to do with geography, nothing to do with how old you are or how old they are. It's got nothing to do with demographics. So expect demographic thinking to have a less effective return on investment as we get into Web3. And so here's, you know, just proving that point, you know, we are literally connecting around the most random things. I mean, on Discord, I was having a little play around and like, there are groups, massive groups about vacuum cleaners. I'm not joking. It's insane. And yet, and also there's maybe 15 different massive groups with millions of people in about vampires. It's completely insane, right? So what happens, and if there's only one slide you take away from this presentation, it's this. Social media changes from a popularity contest built on a social graph that was rooted in the real world. It's like, oh, that's my friend of a friend that I met at uni, who I added on Facebook 12 years ago, right? To a playground for digitally native, AI-driven, interest-based communities. That is directly at loggerheads and in absolute opposition to the way that brands and their agencies do planning, because they start with demographic definitions. And that is going to cause a big problem. People who can get beyond that will win. People who can't will start to lose market share. And so your guys' job is to become cool. And what I mean by cool is conscious of other leverage. You've got to start thinking, what in this network, because networks are all about network effects, what networks can we leverage to grow market share, reposition our brand, and create associations and affinities, right? And it could be any of these, right? Like you can, and just to remind you, there are infinite networks out there, right? And I don't mean badge or borrow or steal equity. I mean contribute in order to create an equity swap. So remind ourselves, community members are worth it. And that's why this is happening. But every single cultural network that exists is out there ready to be leveraged. The question is, are you aware of them? And do you have a playbook to leverage them? Because all the market share you need, all the affinity, all the repositioning you would ever need is there. So the next question, and I'm going to get to the end of this quick, is which network is most strategic for you to leverage? So, you know, we said some stuff there, cricket, there are lots of brands leveraging that network. Swimming, there's probably less brands leveraging that network. Now, does that mean that it's actually a really huge opportunity? Is it blue ocean? No pun intended. Who knows? The question is up to you. It's individual networks don't have value in abstraction. They have value according to the equity of your brand and what it is that you alone could do with that network to leverage that, to create with, you know? So my thing to you would be, what community associations do you want? Make a list. Yes, we want to be here. Maybe here. No, definitely not that, right? And if you look, all the biggest brands in the world, yes, they have a reach and frequency strategy. They do buy ads. They do make TV commercials. And we think that's great. They definitely should. But you know what they do? They earn credibility first with a network, and then they broadcast that. You see? So it's community network and a broadcast network. And the two are different. The brands that I, with love, see doing the worst and having the worst time are the ones that think you just go straight to broadcast. You do broadcast, but you have to do something worthy of broadcasting with a community first, right? That's the new strategy. And so look at all the brands that are coming out of nowhere. That's exactly what they're doing. They've all got communities at the core that they're working with. And then they broadcast that to try and bring more people into those communities, right? So it becomes this strategy. And so my thing to you would be, don't go after networks just because, go after networks that have that sizability that are going to affect culture. Because what you realize is, the curse of being at Vice is it's like a tsunami early warning detection service, right? Every year at Cannes Lions, we're like, guys, there's a tsunami coming. It's called craft beer or veganism or CBD or whatever. And all the brands are like, thanks, Vice. Meanwhile, we're a multi-billion-dollar media company. And these little agencies that frankly aren't that big are like, thanks, Vice. Thanks very much. Right? And we're like, oh God, no, this is going to be bad. And then brands have to M&A their way out of the problem because they didn't see it too early. And they had to, and so ABI had to spend $5 billion on buying a craft beer company to get in the game that they absolutely could have been in if they just listened, right? And you see this many, many times. Every brand was like, oh, that's just niche. Not so much though, because when things come in from the inside to the middle, it changes everything. So, look how many times brands have been caught off guard. And actually, here's the thing, it's because boardrooms think there are trends. There aren't trends. There are just tribes, cultural networks making their way from the inside to the middle, right? They're making their way from innovation to the middle of the bell curve. And that's, that's what this looks like, right? The innovators and the early adopters they eventually, end up with my dad, street artists 20 years later, like my dad finally finds out about it, right? So, and what's really interesting is as these networks move into the mainstream, as they inevitably do, they will. They might not, it might take a couple of goes to get there, but they will. And as they move into the mainstream, if they have enough velocity, they change the mainstream. They fundamentally change our definition of what status is, of what good looks like. We used to think the coolest thing you could ever have was a really high, gas guzzling, beautiful car like a Ferrari. Then Tesla came along. It was very niche at first, but eventually when it crossed the chasm into the middle, it said, no, you have more status if you have a sick, eco-friendly car that's also really cool, but doesn't gas guzzle, because the status game has changed. So every time one of those community networks ends up in the middle, the game changes. But honestly, I'll be honest with you, brands and most of their agencies completely unaware of this. So they're constantly playing with a playbook that's out of date. And it makes their expensive communication that they're spending a lot of money to then get reach and frequency on, make people go, yeah. So here's the interesting thing. Pay attention to these communities and how fast they're growing. And you'll see there's a real opportunity. So many monstrous opportunities are coming at us right now in Web3. And I'd love you guys, for the sanity, to just focus on the community. Try and see which communities are most useful for your brand to leverage. So final bit, what unique contribution allows you to market with this community? And so I'll give you loads of examples later because we've got to get to the chat now, but do something that connects you with that community and creates network effects. The internet is all about network effects. If you go to Silicon Valley, they talk about network effects all the time. You go to a brand boardroom, they never talk about network effects. It's crazy, right? So how do you become impossible to ignore? And here's a clue. It's not brand purpose, okay? It's brand contribution. What can your brand do that no other brand could do for that network that needs you right now? Now, you notice nothing about this is necessarily born or lives or dies in Web3. This is just how to do good work. This is how to do award-winning work, right? And whether it's Lego making 3 feature films or Uber doing this or Converse doing this, you got to think, what is your role in that community? Then you got to think, how seriously do you want to take that? You're going to be passive and just kind of like, are you going to be active and be really like Patagonia, super active in their outdoor explorers community? And then you got to think, how can we participate and contribute? And I'm just, I'm not going to give you this example as I promised. I'll send these around, but a good example was, Smirnoff came to us, they were losing market share. And so we said, guys, you're not doing anything. You're badging and borrowing equity. You're just sponsoring festivals. but why don't you change something? Why don't you contribute? Why don't you make a difference in that community? So we realized that, coming back to DJing, 50% of the audience were female, but less than 3% of DJs on stage were female. So we got Smirnoff to turn around and said to all the festivals, over 100 festivals globally, make your lineups 50-50 male, female next year, or we pull our sponsorship. Now, that's not a media buy. That's not even content. Of course, we made content about it. We dramatized it. We brought media behind it. But the concept was already going to be award-winning. And guess what? It did win awards, right? So this is about earning fame in that network. And if you do that, that network becomes part of your marketing mix. Like, it literally does become like you're not alone anymore. You're rolling with associations that you wanted to build, and those associations have a lot to give you back in return. So it's an equity swap. And so the final bit is then make sure whatever you do, you dramatize that and perform it in public, very publicly, using Web3. So this is my controversial bit. If you came here to hear about all the tactics of Web3, no, this is about how to win awards. And how to do award-winning work comes back to understanding who you are, understanding the network that you're going to contribute to that's strategically relevant for your brand, contributing to it meaningfully, and being a leader in that network. And then you can get into the tactics. That's all strategy. This is tactics now. And so essentially, you know, with the Smirnoff work, we did something where we created an algorithm that would look at all your playlists on Spotify and equalize them, because we realized that young female DJs weren't getting gigs because no one was listening to their music. So you could press a button and equalize your playlist, right? Now there's a technological extension of the contribution that we made, but it's not the whole campaign. Do you see? So, and look, loads of examples here that I'll send you. And I'll let Morten talk you through this, that we did, won lots of Cannes Lions. This was a digital clothing collection, and we recently just did Coca-Cola's first NFT, which was pretty amazing. And I'll send the video around. You know, we did something with the DDR Museum in Berlin, where we reminded young people who didn't even know anything about the Berlin Wall why it mattered by building the Berlin Wall in Minecraft Earth. So everyone woke up one day in Minecraft Earth, and there was this massive wall, and they were like, "What's going on?" Just exactly the same as they pretty much woke up when they realized that there was a wall being built in Berlin. And so suddenly you could experience these things. But these are all logical extensions of good work. They're not trying to take bad work and make it good through a tactic, right? Anyway, I'm going to finish now just to remind you how liquid and exciting this moment is. The NFT that we did for Coke, it was the first branded NFT they've ever done, fetched $575,000. Which we then donated to the International Paralympic Committee. So it's a crazy situation where your marketing is a profit base, not a cost base. And that's a crazy thing, right? And the way we did it is that it was only Coca-Cola that could have done that, because it was all about joy. It was all about happiness. It was all about the distinct brand assets. So there you go. I'm just going to finish now, but step 6 is this. And that's why I said there's 5 steps. Step 6 is what you know how to do already, right? Now, eventually, once you've figured out who you are, figured out the networks and culture that you have the right to leverage, strategically chosen the right ones, contributed in order to activate them and gain fame and earn that, dramatized that using Web3 technology, you now have my full permission to buy as many ads as you want, to keep that idea top of mind and make sure everyone else in the world knows about it, right? But you've got to do something and earn it before you pay to tell everyone, okay? So just final little image. This is a social network. This is what it looks like when you do something on a network. And this is not paid. This is actually Obama's campaign, which I was very, very lucky to work on. And this is a post of Bo the dog, Obama's dog, on the White House lawn, saying, please re-elect my daddy so that I can stay here, right? And this was one of the biggest posts of all time, but it exploded across lots of different networks. And of course, we bought media to make sure it went further. But my point is that you can actually earn a lot of the way there. So with that, thank you so much. I hope that was useful. Let's hand over to Morten. And just final thing, just to remind you, it's all about these 4 things. This is how you do award-winning work, and it doesn't change just because the tactics change. People come to the Oasis in the Web3 kind of mixture. People come to Oasis for all the things they do, but stay for all the things they can be, right? You have the opportunity right now to leverage all of that. Take it. It's a really fun time to be in marketing, but don't fall for cheap tactics. Thank you so much. And Morten, over to you, buddy.
Thank you so much, Mark. And yes, the floor is open. I can see there's already some questions arriving in the chat.